Thank you so much for joining us tonight to help celebrate issue 32.1, this beautiful issue from Green Mountains Review. Green Mountains Review is based at Northern Vermont University, which is just up the hill in Johnson, Vermont. And Green Mountains Review is an award-winning literary magazine publishing poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, literary essays, interviews, and book reviews by both well-known writers and promising newcomers. For the past quarter century, GMR has produced issues of international scope and work regularly selected or cited in Best American Poetry, Best American Short Stories, Best American Essays, Best American Fantasy, and the Pushcart Prize series. The Boston Globe recently cited GMR as one of the top 10 literary magazines in New England. And in 2012, US Poet Laureate Natasha Trethewey selected GMR as one of the 7 literary magazines she would promote at the Library of Congress during her tenure. I'm so pleased to have Elizabeth Powell, who's the editor-in-chief of GMR, in the audience with us tonight, as well as Darcy Abini, who is the managing editor and the nonfiction editor. She will be our host, introducing each of our readers who will be reading from the work that's in the issue currently. And I'm so happy that Vermont Studio Center can help promote and partner with GMR to further the collaborative partnership to help promote this literary journal and the literary arts, both locally in Vermont and also around the world and wherever you are located too. With that being said, I'm going to pass the metaphorical stage mic on to Darcy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Our first reader is January Gill-O'Neil. She's associate professor at Salem State University and the author of Rewilding, Misery Island, and Underlife, that are all published by Cave and Carey Press. From 2012 to 2018, she served as the executive director of the Massachusetts Poetry Festival and currently serves on the boards of AWP, Mass Poetry, and, I'm probably going to say this wrong, Montserrat College of Art. Is that right, January?
Montserrat, close enough.
Montserrat. Her poems and articles have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, American Poetry Review, our journal, Green Mountains Review, Poetry, Plowshares, and WBRI's Cognetti, among others. The recipient of fellowships from Massachusetts Cultural Council, Cave Kenman, and the Barbara Deming Memorial Fund. O'Neill was the 2019-2020 John Renee Grisham Writer in Residence at the University of Mississippi, Oxford. She lives with her 2 kids in Beverly, Massachusetts. Please welcome our first reader, January Gill-O'Neil.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all the organizers. And I'm so happy to be reading with this lovely, amazing group of readers. So it's quite a thrill for me. And I guess special thanks to Liz because she picked the poems that I had written in Mississippi when I was the Grisham Writer in Residence. And after not sending out and writing a lot of serious poems about the state of Mississippi and just where we were with race relations, I got to write these romantic poems. And so these are the ones that got published. It really felt like the first foray back into poetry after being out of it for a while. So GMR has a special place in my heart. So thank you. And I'm thrilled to be here tonight. So I'm going to read the 3 that appear in the issue and one additional, all new work. So that's exciting as well. So the more romantic poems. Okay. This first poem is called Boyfriend Pantheon. Hallmark does not make a card for this, for what we mean to each other, for what we do when my kids are asleep. We are not married, not husband and wife. What do we mean to each other? More than lovers, more than friends, but we are not married, not husband and wife. One card says, know what I love about you? Or to my partner, to my friend, with the inside left blank. My boyfriend asks, what do you know about me as he brings me water at 3 a.m.? With the inside left blank. See, my dog there's somebody at the door, so. I could not make this stuff up. All right, well, I apologize. That's a first. If you don't, do you all mind if I start again? Because I'm a little rattled. The dog is barking, so I apologize. Maybe this gets edited out too. And it's raining. Oh my God. All right. Okay. All right, I apologize. I'm going to start again. That's so embarrassing.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay, shaking it off. Boyfriend Pantheon. Hallmark does not make a card for this, for what we mean to each other, for what we do when my kids are asleep. We are not married, not husband and wife. What do we mean to each other? More than lovers, more than friends. But we are not married, not husband and wife. One card says, know what I love about you? Or to my partner, to my friend, with the inside left blank. My boyfriend says, what do you know about me? As he brings me water at 3 a.m. With the inside left blank, I write to the man I spend my nights with, who brings me a glass of water at 3 a.m., whose body was made to fit inside of my body. There's no one else I'd rather spend my nights with. Who are we when my kids are asleep? His beautiful body fits inside my body. Hallmark does not make a card for this. And again, I apologize for the distraction. I'm assuming that will be the last. The Great Hello. I have to admit, I've always wanted to write a poem with a phrase like this. A big ass moon rises full and wide in the western sky. The deep pond awakens with the tongue of bullfrogs. I'm barely over the threshold before our mouths lock and we slither onto the bed. We watch each other watching each other with a silent urging, a kindness for the other in the pursuit of pleasure. I fling my head back as he grabs my hips, pulls me close, begin to feel myself levitate, hovering above the bed as the shadow of someone I don't recognize but have known all her life. I am an over-easy egg trying not to break her yolk, but I do. The joy of leaving the body tender and shimmering. A moment of gratitude for every daunting thing that brought me to this place where I am my most fearless, my most true. I wick the sweat from his head, slide my hand across his glistening skin before crawling back into myself, sprawled across the sheets, streaked in moonlight. So this is a Massachusetts poem, not a romantic one. The Beyond Place. Eat for the hunger that comes, says our guide, as I try my first service berry. Purplish globes, sweet with an almond finish. I am a first-time forager, marveling this marvel of a landscape made lush by the rush of the Hoosacs' underground waters. The name, he tells us, was translated from Algonquin as the Beyond Place. generous June. Every tree surrenders its green flags while we crouch ground low. Spy the wide splays of leaves, their dark, papery undersides send message from below. This plant is edible. This one will kill you. I climbed out of this world, tongue first to taste another. City girl, chicken of the woods. Yet here in the humid wind softens the cicada's strident song as we root and snip, bend stems back to the point of breaking to discover wild carrot, or is it hemlock? Stick with the berries, I tell myself. A rough twang, a touch of funk, trust the joy I know. And I will end with a very new poem. During the pandemic, I was writing poems, in April, with a poem a day challenge. So I was doing it with this group, and by the middle of a month of challenges, you're just frazzled and you need something to write about. So we found this article about a woman who was swallowed whole by a python. And so we all did our own take on this poem. So this is mine. Woman swallowed by a python in her cornfield. Inside every woman is a snake. Some think I'm a hoax or an oddity, rarer than winning Powerball or being struck by lightning. Everything has a form, even doubt. Think of me as someone you've met in a dream. Green stalks shade the sun, keep me hidden from the villagers, the non-believers. To find me, you must enter me. Oh, that your body fits into my body makes us unholy. Let me press my mouth to your scar, run my tongue along your flesh so I can taste how you wound. The wild boars patrolling the edges won't save you. Footprints, flashlight, machete, slippers, all that I've left behind. Inside every snake is a woman. That's the part of me I love the most. Reticulated constrictor, word made flesh, time unfolding, lore or legend. I am done telling the kinder story. I am a myth of my own making. Part my snake flesh, and you will find me intact, clothed as I was when I visited the corn. Think of me as the gift you're unsure how to open. Thank you.
Thank you so much, January. That was amazing. I have to say my favorite line from Beyond the Beyond Place is, trust the joy I know. Such a great, beautiful line. And we've all had that moment, right, with the dog.
Oh my God, we had a visitor at the door. That off, so I apologize.
No need to apologize. Our next reader is Sandra Simonds. She's a poet and critic and the author of 7 books of poetry: Atopia, Orlando, Further Problems with Pleasure, Steal It Back, The Sonnets, Mother Was a Tragic Girl, and Warsaw Bikini. Her poems have been included in Best American Poetry in 2014 and 2015 and have appeared in many places, including The New Yorker, Poetry Magazine, the American Poetry Review, the Chicago Review, Granta, Boston Review, Plowshare, Spence, Court Green, and Lana Turner. She lives in Tallahassee, Florida, and is an associate professor of English and Humanities at Thomas University in Thomasville, Georgia. Please welcome Sandra.
Hi, everyone. That was beautiful, January. I really enjoyed your poetry. Thank you, Darcy and Sarah and Liz, for inviting me. First of all, I have to share this I'm at a vacation house and this mug says "got braces." It's just so weird. I like weird mugs. This is very strange. I'm going to go ahead and read out of the book that I just wrote. They're in 3 columns, the poems are. So I'm gonna share my screen because I think it's easier to follow along if I share my screen. So I'm gonna do that. Hopefully this works. Yeah. Okay, so a lot of these are I'm only gonna read a few, but I wrote a lot of poems during the pandemic, and so they're the ones sort of freshest in my mind. So I'm gonna read this first one. It's called "I Gave Birth in Another Era." Okay, so I'll read, the first column, the second, and then the third. It's very strange reading in a bed, but we'll try this out. Okay. Woke to the mean air of birds squawking inside the blue, gray, black polyphony of what happens when we lose the terminology to determine how bad things really are. Was there no way to puncture the agonizing film keeping us all corralled here? I looked through the window, bewildering axiom, condition, assumption. I looked at the dwarf orange tree, fruiting sour fruit incessantly. Suppose it is possible to be in 3 states of error at once, and in each place to think 3 things, and in each thing to feel a different version of the salted wind as you are walking along the high sea cliff. Take, for example, apricots, which have been genetically bred to amplify the length of time their fragrance stays in the crisp air of the cadaverous supermarket. Just long enough to place them in your cart and think to yourself, the world is good. You may be very lonely at this point. The grocery clerk scans the apricots and asks you a few questions to which the answers are always no. When will the coronavirus be over? Asked the griever, who's a very small child, in the room we have painted Amalfi blue, but have not yet filled with sea-themed decor. How much of a garden's design is made more beautiful through negative space? Across from the entry for grief is grenade, which derives from the old French word for pomegranate. Why do I write poetry? Because I don't know what it means to live anymore other than the left behind shapes. Why do I write poetry? Because I want to drown. All right, let's see here. I'm trying to do this. All right, the second one I'm gonna read. Kind of a Florida poem. Okay. So this is called Reading the Bell Jar in the Everglades National Park. And I did that. I was teaching the book. It was very depressing I know it's a depressing book, but for some reason it really got to me. Maybe it was the coronavirus and all this stuff. So I was reading this. I went over the winter break to the Everglades. So Esther Greenwood, you probably know, is the main character. When Esther Greenwood is almost raped, why can't she connect what happened to her downward spiral from throwing designer clothes off the hotel balcony to her unwashed hair, electroshock therapy, and worse? Slut, the guy kept saying. Slut, 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 where's my diamond, slut? In 6th grade science class, there was a boy who liked to light the hair of girls on fire.
The science teacher laughed, ha, ha, ha. She didn't believe us when we told her, ha, 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 until the smell of Heidi's burnt braid mixed with the chalk powder that fell off the enormous grave green board. It rained all day. Then I read your poetry. I lied twice. First when I told you I wasn't afraid of rain, and then when I put it in the poem. So I unfolded the piece of paper where the poem was and wrote a true story. 8 or 10 vultures on top of a Corolla pecking at a blue tarp the Everglades National Park provided their visitors. I texted Alex, vultures are the bird form of roaches. Then one of them looked at me. There were vultures everywhere in the swimming pool, vomiting, shitting, blood, blood, blood. It was gross, said Mrs. Delamo, who bought a $700,000 vacation home in West Palm where the birds invaded. It wouldn't stop looking. All the other birds were pecking away at the blue tarp to get to the windshield wipers, which apparently gives off the scent of a carcass when the plastic melts in the sun. Save me, save me, save me, I said to the vulture, but it wouldn't look away. This is that third one. My name is Esther Greenwood. Sometimes I get a bad idea and I follow through on it. That's the difference between me and other people. Other people get distracted by roasting a chicken or watching TV, but I am carnal. I know the difference between killing yourself and stepping down the spiral staircase into the cellar of the self, that really meaty, stringy place wrapped in shadows, booming with an arterial pulse, so that if you were to kill it, it would mean something. Now, look at me. Look at the mirror I'm holding up. You can smash it. There's another face behind it and another one behind that. Just like stars, they're endless and stretch obliviously in their cold calculations. It is Christmas Eve, so go ahead, smash it. I'm sure someone out there is in love with me. Do I have time to read another one, or should we stop? I'm sorry, I never keep track of the time very well, so whatever you want. Can you hear me? All right, no one's answering.
Read another one.
I'd read another one is what I would say too. I'm not the timekeeper though.
All right, I'm not like, I'm a poet. I'm not very good at this kind of stuff. All right, okay, this is the last one in the book. On Avondale and Riverside, past the marble house, full of punctuation and plants, deep where the tornado untwines its watch. What did you want, Valentine? In the shrine of sunshine, I lift my hoodie over my life, pain scale forethought. Your hands were pressed to my face, but I am walking into a glass window. You in Washington, prismatic, but no water. Is that landlocked person real? I asked my phone, synapses strengthened by weed, astrology therapy, and the mute button. You call from the Capitol and I throw my phone in the St. Johns River again. It's okay, you're used to it. Let's get fucked up and forget the pandemic. Forget the homicidal pantomimes with those pretties on screens where you're supposed to enact plenitude, but sink so far into the orchestration of money and shit. How long will I walk away into these lush hours, the ones unspent and togethers incarnadine? Never did take the olive tree out of its bucket. The leaves slowly fell off and I felt awful. Didn't have the heart to garden or compost songs or disease. Long lists of foods I can and cannot eat, the physical aspects crumbling, weight loss, mysterious appearances, a blue dress hanging from a low cloud, makeup turning up in my mailbox shaped like a cottage, all the wrong colors, but still applied them diligently. Touchdown on Mars. The mailbox collapsed. A 7th grader biking down the street was jumped by 3 kids. I said, "Do you want some water?" He was crying. I thought, don't look at me. Please don't look at me. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like an animal. Oh, this word no one may not know. It's like it means the herb or plant that makes dreams. It's a cool word. Oraniogenic. I don't even know how to say it. Oraniogenic. I'll just say oraniogenic. It is the white flower that roars, Oraniogenic, a catastrophic tryst with undulating cumulonimbus clouds, the dripping of water from a fawn-shaped fountain, happenstance in green, someone vacuum cleaning their living room on a Sunday. Oh, love, I don't want to see them anymore, the ghosts of my life, of yours. Can't our togetherness short circuit but no? The refinery wavers, the men trickle out with their lunch boxes, the salt air chemicals sting, sting, sting. It is not a dream. It is everything you hoped to forget but couldn't. It is splashed blood on the boardwalk across from the oceanic feeling you say you've never experienced. Well, I have, I do, every day. I'm sorry I can't help you. I don't know how to speak the language of the dead. Why do men have to kill the women they can't have in poems? Like Richard Hugo's The Lady at Kicking Horse Reservoir. Even as sublimation, a sickness, a devouring and devaluing, like that guy who tells you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And why do the women in the 1980s creative writing workshop nod along to his stupid story? No, you don't love me, dickhead. You just want your hands to turn to weeds so they can brush my dead face at the bottom of your lake. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those were amazing, especially that last one. And also thank you for sharing your screen. I really love to be able to read along at readings. I have my book here because I like to experience it, the sound, but also the visual. So thank you so much. Let's see. Leah Umansky is next. She is the author of 2 full-length collections, The Barbarous Century and Domestic Uncertainties, among others. She earned her MFA in poetry at Sarah Lawrence College and has curated and hosted the Couplet Reading Series in New York City since 2011. Her poems and writings have appeared or are forthcoming in such places as the Bennington Review, Eco Theo, the New York Times, Poetry, the Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, Rhino, and Pleiades. She can be found at www.leahumansky.com or at leah.umansky on Instagram. Please welcome Leah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darcy. All right. So there we go. Okay, now I'm spotlighted. I was like, wait, something's wrong. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to start with a poem from the Green Mountains Review issue. It's a sad one. I don't like starting normally with a sad one, but I'm going to then move to joy, so it's going to be okay. This is a poem that I wrote last winter, right before I lost my cat Graham of 16 years. Now I have a new cat, Moira Rose, and we're together a year now. So this is called White Flag. Picture a garden, circling it, a field on fire, rich with color, but in that color is lack. And at first you can assume a grander theme, assume a seduction associated with color or vibrancy. But that's one of the first things you learn in school. Everything is made up of shades. Black is the absorption of all colors. Do we really get to choose the woman we want to be? Some women play the triangle. I am a conductor. I want to know when my next best time is. I know it's coming. I know it's opening like a closed flower in bloom. So much is tilting in my life towards the sun. I'm saying yes. Do you hear me? Last week, I went to get coffee and was short 31 cents and was about to reload my card, and the barista said not to worry about it. I said thank you to her and that gesture, and as I stood there waiting for my coffee, the song in the shop shifted. And instantly I smiled, humming. It was Dido's White Flag. An epidemic of nostalgia took me captive, held me under, shipwrecked, hidden in the past and cached in memory. I stood there hoarding my love for that song somewhere inside me. I was buzzing, dizzy. I returned to the animal hospital for visiting hours. My cat, Graham, newly blind, post-seizure, hooked up to IVs, deeply sedated, was cage-side. I pet him and kiss his small pink nose, his mouth, and his white tuft on his chest, and then quietly, so quietly, sang in his ear, my little love song for him, the one he likes, our little routine, and he started to wrap his arms around me. He recognized my voice, and in that moment, I thought about angels. I thought about God as he forced his body onto my arm, and his strength scared me, and then I felt it, the energy, the connection. I knew in that moment his love for me, my love for him, was the strongest thing I've ever felt. His response, his responding to me was everything, was more than hurt, was more than pain. It was love. And I realized then the bounty of it. Natalie tells me to lean into my heart of hearts. I am leaning. The heart is a kaleidoscope. So many women's lives live on the wings of men. And I think about my wingspan. I think about my breath, the soars, the raking of dreams, the waiting. I think about the depth of my cache, its bounty. And I think about an article I read about ravens and theory of mind, how they're always looking, always burying, always thinking of the other raven's motives. I'm done thinking like that. I remember what I've hid and why and where. I can uncover it in a sweep of wonder, stretching it out like a sun in the sky, accordion. It has a happy end, but it's sad. Like many of you have already said, since the pandemic started, I have been basically writing nonstop, and I'm almost done with the new manuscript. So these are all pandemic-inspired poems. This next one is called Underpainting. Who can ignore a red bird? I saw one after the big snowstorm last month. All of the park was wintered. It made me forget. Just see the bird, and here I am writing another bird into a poem. When you stop to look at a bird, you relax into it. When you stop and think, oh, are you beautiful? You are already with that bird. A bike rode past me sounding like a bird, and yet maybe it was the world relaxing into me, like joy, like sunlight. What is my joy? My joy is when I'm past it, past the fear, past the decisions and the hindering. My joy is when I feel languished. My joy is when I ease it into fine. My joy is a laugh that stops me. I'm always showing everything. This is the red bird at the ice branch. This is the red bird of my joy. This is the red bird of my fear and my haunts and my sorrows, and yet the bird looks. I look. This is a longer poem. It's in 7 sections, so this might be my last one. We'll see what my time is like. I have a timer going. Different parts are kind of all over the page, as you could see. I don't have it ready to share my screen, but I do that a lot in poems. This is called Starting Point. 1. A friend tells me she only goes to the headlines. Another, that this isn't the life she wants. I don't know how to reckon with all the cracks in the surface. Reckoning makes me think of miracles, and I know it lies in the waiting. This is real life, and we are media res. Never has my middle been so full of heart and longing. Never. 2. We are in the midst of fullness, of the inside of worries, of the midst of a life that looks very much like this, very much like this one. In the midst of things, a woman could look very much like me, could look very much like a woman like me, could look very much like this exacting time, this exacting time. It is exciting. One might say the most exciting time is not to know, but I don't know. I'm trying to be excited. I am at times. 3. In real life, this is how it happens. You just need one. You just need one. I know, I am already that one. I take pleasure in that. 4. What is the glorious pleasure? Isn't all an arc over the truth? Isn't it all an arching, an overarching? Some kinder stories have brutal ends. Some testaments are rooted in folklore. Some stories are just tales, but some tales are truths. The random has sense. The sensical can be enchanting. It is about perspective. 5. I'm seeing it all, and it is a risk. It is a risk worth seeing. I am letting the light in from all angles. When I am walking in the park, I am on the periphery. I saw a couple get married on a hill outside the lower loop of the park last weekend, the hubbub flying in the wind above them. I let that beauty over me. I stepped under it and watched. When I turned the curve of the path, it was behind me. 6. I have put notes everywhere. 7. This is the story, the truth that will be. This is the clarity of a structural pace, of an unlocking. I am reading a book with many hellos, and they surprise me. They ground me. They invite me into feeling. They invite me into perspective. And there is one more that I'm going to read. That's on my computer. Okay. This is another new one. This is called Narrative, and it's out this month in Salamander, though I haven't got my copy yet, so I'm really excited. Actually, I could probably share my screen for this. Hang on. All right, here you go. It's exciting when we're teachers, right? And we know how to do all this. Okay, narrative. How are the dots connecting? I know how my taste is formed. It's already on the first page. If you see the world in stories, as I do. Here's the first story, I am. And the second is the place you go back to, the formative. A friend tells me we just need to find a good egg, and follows with literally and figuratively. Here's a third. The universe is getting creative, and I am too. This is me then, and this is me now. A friend tells me I miss being in your orbit, and I feel my rings widening. I hope they are widening. There's so much we don't capture, but I'm capturing this now with my inner ear and my inner eye. A fourth. I'm trying to catch all the rain in my hands, and I'm pretty good at it. This is what anyone would do. This is all a query, a querying. This happens, that happens, this happens, that happens, this happens, that happens. I have intervened the idea. I received the story at birth. Now I am being a maker. Now this happens or it doesn't. This morning, I brought Halloween decorations to mail Louise and the kids, and the cashier said, gotta keep it festive for the little ones. I said I was shipping it to London for someone else's children, not mine. But I thought, yes, I will keep it festive. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Those were really awesome. I love that line. I feel my rings widening, and then I hope that my rings are widening. I love it. Okay, Angela Woodward is next. And she is the author of the short fictions collection, The Human Mind and Origins and Other Stories, and the novels End of the Fire Cult and Natural Wonders. Her short fiction and essays have appeared in many journals, including the Kenyon Review, American Chordata, Ninth Letter, and the LA Review of Books. She lives in Madison, Wisconsin. Please welcome Angela.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me? Yes. All right. So thanks for having me. And it's so great to read with these wonderful poets. It's really good for me to hear things set up in different ways. It's really nice. So I'm going to read from my story, Notes on the Cinema of Depreciation. And it's a long story, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, and I'm not even going to start at the beginning. I'm going to start towards the beginning and then read another section towards the end. So I have to set it up a little bit. The conceit of this story is that there's a world very much like our world where film directors have decided to remake classic 90s rom-coms as stark, near-silent catalogs of gestures. And in the story, there's a film critic who just feels like this is too much, and she can't really take it. And her sense of movies is that actually the content of the movies doesn't matter. When you go to the movie theater, this thing causes you to sit down in front of it, and that's all that should matter about a movie. But when she comes across the Cinema of Depreciation, she's really taken aback, and she feels like she has to kind of take things into her own hands. So she's interviewing the depreciators and trying to get behind them a little bit. And I could also say that was interested in writing about classic 90s rom-coms because I basically missed the 1990s altogether. My children were born in 1992 and 1994, and I didn't have any cultural intake from that whole decade, except once a year I would see a Woody Allen movie when we took the kids to their grandparents and they could babysit, and then listen to kids' music. So there's just a lot of stuff in the 90s that I had to discover much later. So I have a weird interest in these movies that I did not see when they came out, and I actually had to do research to put this together. So here's excerpts from Notes on the Cinema of Depreciation. I first spoke to Van Marsden, considered the father of the depreciators, 10 months ago. He eloquently defended the depreciators' practice of stripping all peripheral characters from classic 90s rom-coms to leave putative couples struggling to come together against a backdrop of barren parking lots. In the original Richard Curtis, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, a man who was a frequent guest at weddings of an English smart set falls for an American woman. She continually eludes him with a plane to catch, a rich man to marry. Curtis's iconic scenes put Andie MacDowell's character Carrie in a throng of other well-dressed wedding guests. Across the reception hall and in the midst of a garden party, she stands out. The man who loves her must beat his way across the bodies of the other masked celebrants. The constant intervention of drunken lads and bridesmaids creates the comedy and tension of a film that is single-minded in its linear pursuit of a climactic joining of Carrie and Charles. In Marsden's version, Carrie is first seen at a great distance as a pale blot walking down a road. Shot from the treetops, we see a car glide past and round a bend. The car briefly blocks our view of the whitish shape. When it passes beyond the frame, the wisp that was Carrie reappears. Though she should be closer now, the camera draws back and her face remains out of focus. Only in retrospect is it clear that this scene represents the first wedding of the original. In the world Marsden creates, this passage of car against walker stands in for the hubbub of a big church occasion. Marsden sat at a wobbly table in his kitchen with me, seeming grateful for a chance to expound. His wife Martha retreated to the bedroom as soon as I came in, though he followed her out into the hallway and had a whispered conversation with her. I picked up the wooden squirrels and toy cows that cluttered the table. I had expected a harsh cleanliness based on his cinematic aesthetics, but the apartment overflowed with tchotchkes, burnt down candles, ancient film magazines, and bottles of perfume and medicine. Marsden cleared off a swath of pill canisters when he sat back down. He became transfixed with one of those compartmented pill holders, divided into morning, noon, and night for each day of the week. I'd never seen such an elaborate one, with sliding shelves that could be moved to signify an exact hour at which a pill should be taken, and color coding for with food or without food. Look at this, he said, showing me Sunday through Tuesday vacant, and Wednesday with a clutch of tablets left in its latter half. He seemed to mean that I wouldn't understand the fullness without the emptiness, but he struggled to articulate this thought. I mean, it's right here, he said several times, running a finger along the grooves in the container. I asked him about his version of Richard Curtis's masterpiece, Love Actually, which seems to bear little resemblance to the original, except for the manic cutting between storylines. I thinned out a few threads, sure, he told me, but I was meticulous in redoing the way Hugh Grant walks across the room greeting his new staff. The linger on the pretty maid, his turn and pause and regret, it's all there. The fact that Marsden's Hugh Grant stand-in traverses a shabby condominium lobby alone and makes his regretful pause in front of a row of empty mailboxes didn't make the scene, in Marsden's eyes, any less of a faithful reproduction. Marsden told me how proud he was of the work of some of his followers. He boasted about the remake of the high school romp She's All That by Peter Hunter. He not only stripped out all the peripheral people, he replaced them with trees, he said, something he and I talked about for ages. Before anyone knew what we were up to, we messed around with these nature forest shots. People don't realize how exacting this work is. I mean, individual tree trunks for each person in the prom scene. It's more like embroidery than cinematography. It's incredibly painstaking. He went into a technical explanation of the markers and templates, both analog and in the editing software, but I tuned that out. I picked up a plastic hula girl and made her dance by pressing the spring in her pedestal. Her beady eyes looked past both of us. Finally, I cut him off. People love these films as they were, I said, but Marsden insisted that the search for a soulmate is even more primary in the Depreciators remakes. My movies make life bearable, he said, for you even, bearable. It was as if he had crafted that word just for me. I deserve more than that, I said. Yes, you do. You really do, he told me. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. So there are other depreciators, and she gets a little bit deeper into figuring out who they are and what they're up to. So I'm gonna read another page in the middle of the story. As you're following around in the book, it's gonna be hard. Marsden had told me there were other depreciators that no one knew about. They were inserting little pockets of absence in their movies, just flickers of unexpected loss. It might be one scene on a street corner and the extra walking across in the background looks like he's cutting through a crowd, but there's only a couple pedestrians, one parked car, he said. I thought he said it just to get rid of me, but after months of searching, I came across a possible example. It was in Cleo, a comedy about a clan of fashion designers. Paul Farrow's film could easily fall into the category of a blindness, whipped up to distract with pretty clothes and women clawing each other. I was compelled by one scene where the family gathers to discuss the retirement of the paterfamilias. A maid comes in with coffee. After setting the tray down in front of the elder sister, she turns and nods to an empty chair. The way the maid leaves the room, she seems to be walking around awkwardly stretched out legs before she picks up speed and takes the most direct route to the doorway. We never see the maid's face. The maid has no line in the credits, though all the other minor characters are named and attributed. I wrote to Farrow repeatedly, but he refused to see me. All I can tell you, he allowed me to print, is that there's nothing there. You're on the wrong track. Farrow's use of the word nothing spoke volumes. With the depreciator's respect for absence, nothing meant its opposite. I watched the film several times through, and the one scene at least 50 times. I thought the actress playing the maid may have simply stumbled, but the tray never dipped in her hands. I slowed it down. I froze each frame so I could study the way her feet fell. She began to encapsulate grace, like a figure skater, deliberate in her placement and balance, crafting an arc around the invisible person in the armchair. After a late night session with the scene in Cleo, I got off the couch and made my way to the bathroom. The motion of my legs through the thick indoor air felt nimble compared to the slow-mo I'd been staring at. Yet my muscles ached and impending sleep half numbed me. The indentations in the worn carpet tripped me up. One of my hips was jammed in its socket, the flexors tight, my pelvis not aligned with my forward motion. I'd been alone in my apartment for days. My only communication had been the emails with Faro and the phrases in quotation marks of my earlier interviews with Tomatic and Marsden. Only now that I was pressed against the cool sink, brushing my teeth, did all their voices fall away. A strand of thought burned its way across my brain like a pair of headlights on a tree-lined road. When it subsided, I was left with my reflection, a disheveled woman, foaming at the mouth, puffy eyes staring at a thing that stared back at her. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. I love that line. My pelvis not aligned with forward motion. It's like your body is so mismatched with the motion. Let's see, Sarah. Where is Sarah? I think that's all of our readers.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes if anyone from the audience wants to ask a question for any of our readers. I'm going to put it in gallery mode. And yeah, it's, not an obligation, but if anyone wants to say, hey, hello, or ask a question, or yeah. And if not, it's been a pleasure to hear all of your work in this amazing issue. And yeah. I have a question for
say something. Can I say something?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say I didn't quite know what to expect tonight, but I feel like I got caught in a torrential downpour of blessings, and I want to thank everybody who read. It was really lovely and varied, and everyone's strengths were in full view, I thought. I really appreciate all of you. I want to say thanks.
Thanks so much for being here. That's such a nice compliment for everyone. And we also have Kylie is here. Kylie is a poetry reader and also does the reviews editor for GMR. Thanks for being here, Kylie. And I also see Kylie's mom. And I don't know if Darcy or Liz, you want to say anything about the crafting of this particular issue. Yeah.
It was really fun to craft this particular issue. We'd been doing a lot of special issues and redoing our website and making some changes. And it was nice to go back to just some good old traditional editing on the page. And I'm just really grateful. I think also there are so many strong female voices in this particular issue, and I'm really proud of that. And I think that there are lots of different takes on female experience, and I also really love the cover. Elena Kalatiak Davis is a poet and a great friend, and she has been doing some visual art, and I'm so happy that I convinced her to let us run it as the cover. So I'm just, I'm so grateful to everyone who read and grateful for your work. And when that's, there are a lot of negative things one can say about social media, but one of the really positive things is that I've gotten to know some people through social media who I might not have met otherwise. Like I was familiar with people's poetry and but didn't know them personally, and social media gave me the opportunity to meet them. And if the writers wanted to talk at all about process and what their process is and how it's changing and not changing, I'm always interested to hear about that as well. But thank you, everybody, and thank you to everyone for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Liz. I always love to know like the little behind the scenes notes on crafting of each issue. And I love knowing that about the cover. The cover is gorgeous. I think maybe in alphabetical order, in the order that you read, if you want to just a couple sentences on your process, and then we'll close out the evening. I'm going to switch it back to speaker mode, so we're not in the gallery anymore. So I think if Jan, if you want to, if you feel like it, you don't have to.
Sure. You know, I'm trying to remember what the process was. I feel like my process has completely changed over the last year. But I know that I think out of the series of poems, I think the Boyfriend Pantheon might have been that out of the three that I read, that one came the quickest, and that was a Pantheon. And it really just, that one was, you know, I'm in a store and trying to look for a Hallmark card and can't find it. So, but you know, sometimes when you're in tune, it just, you know, like you don't have to look far for a line or a trigger or something to get the writing going. And out of the batch, I think the hardest one to write was and the oldest one of the set is the Beyond Place. And to try to, you know, talk about, you know, being a first-time forager and not comfortable in nature, which is a running joke with all of my friends, which I'm getting more and more comfortable with nature. So, but I usually just sit down and try to write a solid draft, and then it probably takes a few weeks to sort of revise. So I'm really curious about the forms of some of the other poets tonight. So I'd love to hear a little about that.
Thanks, Jan. The Boyfriend Pantheon really resonated with me, I have to say. After being long married and now in a different phase of life. And I also really appreciate the use of form with, you know, the word boyfriend almost seems silly to me to use when I use it, but I'm not going to be like my aunt and be like, oh, my beau.
There's just not really the right word. So it's just kind of fun to play with it. You know?
I love it. I love it so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra?
Sure. Yeah. You know, I come from a pretty experimental tradition. My first teacher was Harriet Mullen, way back, you know, years and years ago. So I like to experiment with form, and I was reading A.R. Ammons and his long poems, you know, like little strips. And I went to the I mean, this is a word. I went to the dollar store, and they had a big receipt paper, and I said, hey, can I buy that from you? And the lady's like, we don't sell the receipt paper, but I'm going to just give them to you, put it in your purse. And so I started writing, and I hope that she never got in trouble, but so I started writing these poems on these receipt paper, and like to try to get like skinny poems handwritten on these big roll. And then I just started working with that form, the triptych form. I like the idea that three things could exist simultaneously, stories that were tangential to each other, related, but not necessarily like they were relational, you know what I mean? Like, and that they exist at the same time on the page. So I think that's why I mean, as a form, I guess I made up to some degree. So I like the idea of using a kind of experimental form. And, you know, I think that was kind of the way that I shaped those poems, and they just kept, I tend to, like I've written a book of sonnets, like I tend to like to experiment with the formal qualities, like what you can do, like can you make them different, you know, like the one in the issue, it reads differently than the ones, some of the other ones in the book. So I have a whole book of those, and I had a lot of time, more time than usual because of the pandemic. Also, I just tend to write a lot. So I revised, like, I think January, like similarly, I tend to write things very quickly, and then I'll revise later, you know, like 6 months to a year, but sometimes quicker than that. I don't know. I hope that it sheds some light on, I like the way for me that the titles kind of hold the poem together at the top, like 3 panels. That's kind of an idea that I had. But yeah. So.
Thank you so much, Sandra. I love knowing that part of the process that involves the dollar store. I don't know. I'm always like weirdly in the dollar store for some reason. And I've become friendly with the manager, and she tells me such funny stories, but like the dailiness of the register tape and using that as a way to define a poetics for one particular poem is so super cool. And taking the daily life, the lived experience, and putting that, down on a register tape. It's just, it's so perfect in a artistic way as well as a poetic way. I mean, poetry is art, but like I could see visual artists, especially from the surrealist tradition, perhaps having some fun with register tape.
Make a poem with that situation in the book, and I like that idea because the dailiness is a part of all of my poetry anyways. Dailiness is a really, like, my kids enter my poems a lot, and so thank you for noticing and even asking that. I'm really grateful to be in this conversation, so thank you.
Fabulous work. Thank you.
I think, Leah, you were the third reader, so I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about a little bit about your process.
Yeah, it's nice being the third and not being the last, because there's a W and I'm you. Yeah, hold on. Okay. The question was about the poems in the issue, right? So White Flag is very much a prose poem. This is the first page, and then this is the second page. And the other poem, Renaissance, which I didn't read, also has really long lines. So I, like a lot of other people have already said, tend to write really fast, which I think is because I type really fast. So, and I also tend to, more often than not, really use the whole page. And so I really love using both margins. And I really love playing with the margins too. And so a lot of my poems sort of just naturally kind of bounce back and forth. And so you could hear that in the one that, not the one I shared my screen for, but the one that was in 7 parts. Like if you heard the sort of meandering back and forth, that's because that section is like all over the page. And people always ask me, I remember, I don't know, a long time ago, a friend was like, oh, I always imagine that you have this like really big notebook and that you write everything by hand across it. And that's how you get these prosy poems. And I was like, no, that's not true. I never write in a notebook, which breaks my heart because I wish I did. But, I'm always typing, and it's always just kind of, I guess, innate. But I'm also kind of really inspired by pop culture, which most people kind of know that about a lot of my poems. And so hearing that Dido song in that Starbucks really gave me like the second half of that poem. Like I was in such a sad place knowing I was going to lose my cat. And so that kind of balance really kind of got me through that. So, but going back to what Sandra in January said, and I really hate admitting this, but I'm not going to lie. I am not a big editor of my work. Like I very rarely go back and edit a poem. If I do, it's like right away, or maybe the next day after maybe I show it to some of my friends in workshop. Otherwise, like the idea of going back to a poem in 6 months to a year, never. Like I don't think it's ever happened. So, all right. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, it's true. Like I sort of have a 2 to 3 week mark where I put things in the drawer and then come back to them, because at 6 months things can change so much in one's life or in the situation that the argument of the poem begins to change and you don't want to rewrite the poem. So there's sometimes a certain amount of time that one has. So I'm glad you brought up that the idea of time and revision. Angela, how about you?
It's so interesting to hear you all talk as poets. You're talking about the page and the form, and I feel like I should think about that more, kind of get me out of some of my habits. But I guess I was just always looking for an idea that's strong enough to take me all the way through. And once I get it, I think like a lot of the others, I write it really quickly. And this particular story, I had some idea for a long time that I was going to write about these rom-coms, and it took forever to get it going. And then I wrote like 3/4 of this story, and then I put it away. I'm like, this is the worst thing I've ever done. And I just locked it away. And I wrote this other thing that was like 100 pages long that was truly terrible. And then I was really in despair. And I looked at this one again. I'm like, oh, I just need to end. Like a year later, I understood what it needed. And then I put it all together. So that's pretty unusual for me. Usually I can stick with it and get it all the way done. But this one was somehow elusive, and I didn't trust it. But it had that kind of hardness that I like. That's not really me in the story. It's kind of has some passion, but it's not sentimental. So yeah, this was kind of a hard one to pull off.
Yeah, I really appreciated so much of what you said about the 90s. I too miss the 90s, having had children in the early 90s. It does feel like sort of a lost decade. And, you know, if I had to write about it, it would be kind of difficult without even having lived through it, without some research. Anyway, the story is so evocative, and I really, really enjoyed your reading of it. And hello to Madison, Wisconsin, home of my alma mater. Any other questions before we wrap it up? I really enjoyed some of these process questions. You know, like I really think for poetry, I'm not sure if this for fiction or creative nonfiction, is that sometimes a poem can't be finished until we live a certain part of our life. You know, like for me, when a work does hang out and needs editing after a couple of years, like there might be elements of the thing I'm learning or psychically learning or living, you know, how Rilke says we must live the questions. And sometimes those aren't clear in a poem yet. And so I think that's when like the long-term editing comes in, for me at least. So it's really great to hear everybody talk about their process, and it's so good to see all your beautiful faces and hear your gorgeous sonic boom of works. And thank you so much. I'll turn it back over to Darcy and Sarah.
I'm really grateful that we were able to have a little chat about, I'm going to put it on gallery view so I can see all of you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And it is such a thrill to hear and see and witness so many women identifying voices coming through in this issue. And I encourage you all to, if you haven't already, to go out and grab the issue. I think Darcy dropped in the link earlier towards the top of the chat, and follow all of these writers. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and keep writing and keep reading and keep making great art. So thank you.